Hey guys, how's it going? In the video comments you asked, why aren't you just using the Jakarta EE 10 core API? And here is the answer. If you follow this series closely, then you certainly know that I am part of the Jakarta EE team, which means I am committed to JAX-RS, the Jakarta EE RESTful standard. And you might ask the question, why is that guy not using the single jar solution, the Jakarta EE 10 jar that is available on Maven Central? And the answer is not as simple as you might think. So first, we need to understand what is Jakarta EE 10. Well, Jakarta EE 10 was made as a standard that allows you to write an application without understanding what underlying application server product it will run on. So the Jakarta EE standard is separating the application server product from your application, which is not quite what we're doing here in this video. In this video, we try to write an application without the help of an application server completely. So this is answer number one. We don't have an application server. We don't want to abstract from an application server. So why using the Jakarta EE application at all? But certainly this is not all. If you check the content of the Jakarta EE 10 specification, then you will notice, yes, there are similarities, let's say it in that way, between what I did and what Jakarta EE 10 does. So here we have a graphic from the Eclipse Foundation, and it tells you what is the content of the Jakarta EE 10 specification. And what you can see here is that it not only says there is RESTful web services, there is JSON processing, there's JSON binding, and so on. So all what we added to our application in earlier video episodes. There also is a version number. And you can see here, for example, we have to use exactly RESTful web services 3.1, exactly JSON-P 2.1, exactly JSON-P 3.0, and so forth. So this means if we are going with the Jakarta EE 10 core AP jar, which is fine, which will be working, we are bound to exactly that version numbers. There are no updates for the Jakarta EE 10 specification that allows you to replace, for example, the RESTful web services 3.1 by 3.2. or the JSON-P processing 2.1 by 2.1.1. This is not allowed. The Jakarta EE core specification and jar file are limited to exactly these versions. So if you want a new version, you have to wait until the next specification and AP jar file is published. And this might be between 1 or 2 years. So you don't want to have to wait for so long. So the answer number 2 is, we don't want to be bound to these rather old versions. We want to go with always the latest stuff, and this is not possible if you are binding yourself to the Jakarta EE core specification. You need to have the freedom to step on with those versions that you like to have. Another point is that you cannot drop something from that jar file, which means typically you like to have the smallest footprint available. So there shouldn't be something in a jar that you don't want to actually use. So you need to get rid of stuff that you don't want to. For example, if you don't need like JSON-B, then why should you put it into production? You cannot do that. You can't strip JSON-B from Jakarta EE 10. It's bound in the same jar file. Well, certainly you could unpack it, but why should you do that if you have the possibility to instead simply collect what you want to have? So the point is, adding things that you want to have for small projects, it is much easier than dropping it from a big bundle if you want to not have it. By the way, I said it was originally made for separating the application you wrote from the server that is implementing the runtime specifications. And I need to tell you, there actually is no single jar solution for such an application server. There are single jar solutions, for example, from Payara and other vendors too, but they are not implementing that thing that we think is the benefit of the core API, which is the Java SE bootstrap. So if you want to use the SE bootstrap, you cannot go with that single jar solutions from Payara. I'm asking myself, what benefit do I have from adding a full application server that's implementing everything from Jakarta EE standard, just under the label it's also core able. What I want to say is the ID of the core API is not fulfilled by that application servers. They are full-blown standard application servers, which includes the core API, but they do not support the SE bootstrap, so you cannot bind them in the standard way to your application. You can bind it in a non-standard way. You can bind them, for example, using the using the Payara's specific native API, which is not what we want. We want to have the freedom to replace the runtime. We want to use the Java SE core API, and there is no product that provides both. So until someone comes with a single jar runtime implementation that does not fulfill only its native API, but also fulfills the core SE bootstrap API, and that is only an implementation of the core API, but not a full-blown server, then we can do a video about that. But until that point, we just don't have any benefit from the core API. So we don't have the solution that we like to have, the smallest possible server. Having said that, you now have an understanding why I didn't choose the Jakarta EE10 core API jar, but instead I'm going with single jars and single APIs that fulfill the same set of APIs. It's exactly the same API, but I can choose what I want to have. I can choose the version numbers. I can step on with new versions. I am not bound to a native API just to get a single jar solution. So I have more flexibility. And in the end, the outcome is smaller, and smaller means smaller footprint, smaller security problems, smaller memory consumptions, and so on. Smaller is always better. So if you still want to use the Jakarta EE10 API instead of the single jar files, then here's the source code change you need to do. As the API itself is completely unchanged, we only change the packaging from single jars, from single specifications to one common jar for Jakarta EE10, which contains exactly the same files, class files and interface and all that. It's exactly the same. We don't have to change anything in our Java source code. So if you don't believe it, compare it to my early videos. It's really the same file. I didn't change a line. It still is working if we do the change, and the change itself is completely found in our dependency management of our build tool of Maven, and you cannot compare it here easily. So let's use a git diff to do that. And I already checked it in, so let's go with log -p, and you will see. Let's give it a bit more space. The red lines is what I have removed from the project. So there are no more single version numbers because Jakarta EE10 is exactly binding you to those versions, which I already said earlier in the video. There is no more thing you can decide about. And you can find here that I completely removed the single jar files from the class path. So there is no more JAX-RS, there is no more inject, and so on. This is gone completely. And the sole thing I added is this one. So you see here, I'm adding from the group Jakarta platform the artifact Jakarta EE core API. Yes, you have to repeat the word Jakarta here. It's not nice, but they have chosen to name it that way. And it's really only the core API. And as you have seen in the graphic before, it's really the same stuff, just bundled in one jar file. By the way, you can ignore this one. This was no deliberate change. But by the way, you can forget about this one. This has nothing to do with Jakarta EE. It was just a change from an early video where I explained how to use the free port, and I don't want to use the free port option. I want to go with 8080. Again, has nothing to do with Jakarta EE. Just ignore it. So if you still don't believe that it's the same, let's do a MVN dependency tree. If you don't know this command, it prints you what jar file is using which other jar file in a tree hierarchy. So you can see everything on the class path and you know why it's included. And you see here, our project, this is our project, is including the Jakarta EE core API. And this one is including what we just had. So this is why it's still working. It is the same, but with a detour. We're not explicitly giving it the jar names or dependency names and version numbers, but we rely on the core API 10.0.0 doing that. And here you can see what I explained earlier. If you want to step on, for example, in Jakarta EE, you can't. You're bound to what the Jakarta EE API jar says what its dependencies are. So you need to wait until there is, for example, 10.1. There are no plans for 10.1, so you end up waiting very long. You end up waiting for an 11, which is coming out in Q1 or Q2 next year. So you have to wait many, many months, possibly years. So is it still working? Yes, certainly it is. We can still compile it. Let's do a clean first so you believe that it's completely compiling. Then we do a package, and if we have packaged it, we will run it. So we're going through all the build. The build is fine. Can we also execute it? Yes, certainly. And the simplest way we can execute it is with the Maven exec Java command, which is building the class path and then booting up our application server. So you see it is starting, and we can even invoke it with this command. So you see here the answer, and you see here the log. So everything is just as it was before. We just replace the way how our dependency APIs are bundled. They are not bundled in single jars, they're bundled in a common jar. And that's it. So you don't have to remind anything more than that. But again, remember all the negative things I have said early in the video. So in this video series, I will not go on with the Jakarta EE core API. I will go on with the single jars. I hope this answers the question why I was not using the Jakarta EE10 core API, but instead use the single API jars. So I hope you learned something today, had fun like I had. Stay safe, and as always, party on.